As with all flintlock weapons, there comes a time when a little maintenance is required. When the weapon stops shooting, the first thing you check is the flint. There are many ways to sharpen or nap a flint with just as many tools. This is how I keep my flints in good shape. For tools, I use a simple piece of brass round stock that has been shaped to form a step at one end. This, combined with a hammer built into the short starter, is all you require. Positioning this step at the dull edge of the flint and striking down with a hammer chips off the dull edge and leaves a sharp edge ready to create the necessary sparks. This process will work until the flint is so stubby that the jaws impede contact with the frizzen, or, as in this case, the flint breaks. The next step in getting your baker, or indeed any flintlock weapon, shooting again, is to replace the flint. In order to do this, you will need a simple tool, either a turn screw or a piece of rod fashioned to fit through the hole in the tightening screw of the jaws, if such a facility exists. Simply loosen the screw and remove the old flint. You will notice that the flint is not held in the jaws by itself, but rather it is wrapped in a piece of leather with a hole punched or cut in the middle. The function of this leather is to enable the jaws to tightly grip the flint while reducing the chances of it breaking under the vice-like hold. This function was also filled historically by a strip of lead sheeting, it too having a hole in the middle. The reason for having the hole in the middle is to allow the flint to be set as far back in the jaws as possible. Without this feature, the flint may impede the closing of the frizzen while at half cock. The selection of flint should be based on the following few features. The flint should be nicely beveled, with the short bevel forming the rear end and the long bevel forming the front end. The flint should also have a reasonably flat surface on top for good fit in the jaws. The width, as we will see, should correspond to the width of the frizzen. It is important to note that the flint is essentially a piece of rock, and as such will never be completely regular unless the cut variety are used. Replacing the flint in the lock is a simple process. Simply wrap the back end or the short bevel in the piece of leather, making sure that the hole is positioned at the rear edge. Once this is done, hand tighten the jaws. With the jaws loosely holding the flint, close the frizzen and begin adjustment. The flint should sit square to the frizzen, rotating the flint as necessary to achieve this. Next, ensure that the flint is evenly positioned and centered on the frizzen. Pinching around the frizzen as shown is a reliable method for checking this. Now that the flint is positioned correctly, tighten the jaws with either your turn screw or the rod. There may be some movement or change of position of the flint as the jaws tighten. Once finished, check for final fit and position. You will notice that there is no movement of the flint and that the cutting edge is positioned close to but not touching the frizzen while the lock is at half cock. With repeated nappings, the flint should last for dozens of rounds, with anywhere from 10 to 15 rounds expected from every napping. After heavy use, even napping or replacing the flint will not prove the solution to getting back in action. For the next and most complicated step, the frizzen must be rehardened. To remove the frizzen spring must be compressed. This can be done by carefully clamping the spring with a pair of vice grips, applying just enough pressure to take the tension off the frizzen. The frizzen should wiggle loosely when this is achieved. Minimizing the clamping and ensuring that the clamping force is applied as far away from the bend in the spring as possible are good recommendations to to avoid damage. Once this is done, simply remove the screw from the lock plate. The next step is to dress the face of the frizzen. If you are having to perform this step in getting your lock to function effectively, then your frizzen will probably look something like this. Sanding it smooth should be the goal. This evolution involves heat and chemicals to impart what is known as a case on the face of the frizzen. This is achieved by forcing carbon into the metal. Traditionally, this was done using bone charcoal and a long, slow application of heat in a furnace. I use MPS, or MAP gas, to heat the frizzen, as it burns hotter than propane, though oxyacetylene would be a good, if not preferable, option. As for chemicals, I use a product known as caseinate to effect the hardening. I got mine at Track of the Wolf, but it appears as though they don't stock it at this time. A similar product is available from Midway and other such suppliers. With all the materials assembled, I use some bricks to create a rudimentary forge, with the torch pointing upward and the frizzen sitting on top with its face uppermost. The frizzen is heated to a cherry red, and then the compound is poured onto the surface. The compound melts and is absorbed by the metal. Over time, there's a visible decomposition, and I usually apply a couple of teaspoons over about a 30-minute duration. The heat and the chemicals are left to do their work. Eventually, a crust is formed on top of the frizzen, with what seems to be a molten layer of hardening compound underneath, next to the metal. After about half an hour, the metal is quenched, compound and all, in water. Once cool, the residue can be scraped off. It is messy, but with a wire brush, it comes off quite easily. What is left is a grey-colored surface on the face of the frizzen. Slight discoloration should definitely be expected. This process could be repeated for a deeper and therefore longer-lasting case, if required. A simple test of hardness can be achieved using a tool by attempting to score the face of the frizzen. No scoring or marring should occur. The frizzen can now be replaced on the lock using the reverse process from the removal. Compress the spring slightly, then fit the frizzen with its screw back into the lock plate. It will be necessary to place the lock at half cock to give room for the frizzen to be fitted in the closed position. Test the operation of the frizzen for functionality, and the lock is ready for reinstallation. Unless the lock is suffering from extreme wear and or very weak springs, these 3 steps performed in this order will 99% of the time remedy a faulty flintlock serviceable and back in action. Thanks for watching.